Welcome to Fantasia, home of the melodious. My name's Azallea, and today, gonna be bringing you guys another update to my Dinomist deck. So without any further ado, let's just jump right into this. So starting off, we were playing 3 copies of Dinomist Terran, and Terran is one of the best Dinomist monsters in the deck because it allows us to go for searches. So if Terran destroys something by battle, you can search any Dinomist card straight from your deck, including spells and traps, which is phenomenal, because Howling and Charge are 2 of the most important cards in this deck. Okay, so moving on, we were playing 3 copies of Dinomist Plesiosaur, and Plesiosaur, again, is another fantastic card in this deck. All of your opponent's monsters will actually lose 100 attack and defense for every Dinomist card that you control, which includes monsters, pendulum scales, continuous spell and trap cards, and everything like that. So Plesiosaur can actually make your opponent's monsters fairly easy for your Terran or other Dinomist monsters to run over, because Dinomists are a very battle-oriented deck. Okay, so the next card that we play is 1 copy of Dinomist Stegosaur. Stegosaur is really here as a tech. It's also a really nice scale to have, a low scale. So if another pendulum monster you control battles an opponent's monster, after damage calculation you can actually destroy both of those monsters. So this is actually pretty nice. If your opponent's attacking into something of yours and they didn't read Stegosaur's effect, you can just catch them off guard and destroy their monster in the process as well. The next card that we play is 1 copy of Dinomist Ankylos. Ankylos is a pretty decent high scale, and Ankylos has a pretty nice effect as well. So you can banish any monster destroy a battle with a Dinomist monster you control. So this is really nice because the fact that some cards like Burning Abyss and things like that will get effects if they're sent from the field to the graveyard. However, if you banish them instead, you prevent your opponent from getting those additional effects off, and that's pretty nice. Okay, and then the next cards that we play, 2 copies of Dinomist Rex. Rex is just so good because it can potentially, you can get rid of a lot of cards on your opponent's side of the field and in their hand by just shuffling it into your opponent's deck. So if Dinomist Rex attacks, after it attacks, you can actually activate one of its effects. So you contribute another Dinomist monster to either make a second attack, and if it does, it can inflict piercing damage, or you can shuffle 1 card from your opponent's hand or their side of the field back into their deck. And this effect does not target, which is why it's so potent. You can get rid of anything, even like Chaos Max and stuff that has protection effects in them. Rex can just shuffle that stuff back. And of course, we're playing 2 copies of Dinomist Spinos, and Spinos is also great because you contribute 1 other Dinomist monster you control and then activate one of these effects. So this card can attack your opponent directly this turn, and this card can make a second attack during each battle phase this turn. So Spinos is really good, especially because you can activate both of those effects at the same time by just tributing 2 Dinomists on your side of the field. Tribute 1, it can attack twice. Tribute the other, it can attack directly. So technically, you can attack your opponent directly for 5,000 damage. And it's such a great card to just catch your opponent off guard and end the game with. But notice that we were playing more of the level 4s than we are of the level 5s. You don't really want to open with the level 5s. You want to activate them into your pendulum scales with things like Howling, and then when you get rid of them in your pendulum scales, either for their protection effects or things like that, when they're in their extra deck, you can then pendulum summon them out that way. So you really don't want to draw into them. You want to see the level 4s instead. So yeah, that does it for the Dinomist monsters. Next off, we're going to go into some of the hand traps, which would play 3 copies of Ghost Ogre and Snow Rabbit. Really great hand trap for just hitting your opponent's field spells, monsters that are activating on the field, things like that. It's one of the most versatile hand traps in the game right now. And last but not least, we're playing 1 copy of Maxi. Absolutely amazing card. Again, because your opponent, it deters them from continuing to special summon. If you get enough cards, Dinomist can just OTK really, really fast, especially with cards like Spinos, with things like Plesiosaur. Your opponent won't stand a chance if they give you too many cards. But yeah, that does it for all the monsters. It's a fairly low monster count deck because of the fact that Dinomists, now they're actually a really great control deck thanks to Howling and all of their back row that they can play now. So this is the kind of variant it is. Okay, so next off we're going to go into the spell cards. Starting off, we were playing 3 copies of Dinomist Charge, and Charge is the searcher for the deck, so you can add any Dinomist monster from your deck to your hand if you activate this card. So Plesiosaur can search this, this can search Plesiosaur. Searcher searching your searcher is always fantastic, and Charge is such a great recovery tool as well, because once per turn, if a Dinomist card is sent from your field or to your extra deck face up, you can add one of those cards back to your hand. So, if your Pendulum Scale gets destroyed, you can add it back to your hand. Monster gets destroyed, you can add it back to your hand. Fantastic tool for just recovering your resources, and then it allows you to set up your scales again next turn, then Pendulum summon more things, and keep going from there. Okay, so the next card that we play is just a little bit of back row removal because Dinomists like to pendulum summon. You don't really want to run to a strike or a warning. We run 3 copies of Mystical Space Typhoon. Fairly good, again, for stopping things like field spells as well. And last but not least, we're running 1 copy of Limited Removal, because we are a very battle-oriented deck, so Limited Removal helps us buff our Dinomists so that we can easily run over our opponent's monsters. With this on Spinos, you know, it's a fairly easy OTK as well. Right, so that does it for all of the spell cards. It's fairly low spell count because we run a lot of traps. So we're going to go into that right now. So starting off, we were playing 3 copies, of course, of Dinomist Howling, and when you activate this card, you can immediately set 2 Dinomist cards from your deck into your Pendulum Scale. So this can be fantastic for setting up for a huge play next turn. Also allows you to set up your scale so it protects Howling, and it's amazing, right? Howling also has the effect where you can, it's like a compulsory evacuation device. If you tribute 1 Dinomist monster that you control, you can target 1 card on your opponent's side of the field and return it back to their hand. Really great if your opponent's setting like 1 back row every turn. You can just bounce that back row during their end phase back to their hand, you know, bounce their combo pieces, bounce their link monsters, everything like that. Howling is such good field control for the deck, and it's fantastic. Searchable by Terran as well. Next off, we're playing 2 copies of Dinomist Rush. Dinomist Rush is a great way for us to get more bodies onto the field without having to pendulum summon and things like that. You can do it on your opponent's turn as well, and it's really great because the monster that's special summoned by this card is actually unaffected by all of the card effects. So Raigeki, things like that, it doesn't matter, right? So you can easily chain this to your opponent's back row removal. They go minus from using their MST or Cosmic Cyclone, and you get a free monster on your side of the field. This is also one of the best ways to get something like Rex or Spinos out of your deck to your side of the field. And it's also great to get Plesio's out, because then Plesio's can just decrease your opponent's monster's attack and defense values. So if they're in the battle phase, it could deter them from continuing to attack. Next off, we're playing 1 copy of Echo Oscillation. This is personally my favorite tech in the deck. Echo Oscillation allows you to target 1 card in your Pendulum zone. You can destroy it, then draw 1 card. And in conjunction with something like Dinomist Charge, where you can keep adding that the Dinomist card that was sent to your extra deck back to your hand, you can just keep, you know, activating it, pop it, add it back to your hand. You get a free draw. So you go pluses. You get so many pluses every single turn. It's just incredible. Okay, so the next card that we play is 2 copies of Pendulum Reborn. I decided to tech this in, and it's been working really, really well. We have a low monster count, and because, you know, you can't pendulum summon too many things at the same time from your extra deck unless you have Link monsters set up, Pendulum Reborn allows you to put extra monsters onto your side of the field, especially on your opponent's turn, because it puts something on the field for Howling to tribute, it puts something on the field for some of the other cards that we're going to go into as well. But Pendulum Reborn is a fantastic card. The next card that we're going to get into is going to be 2 copies of Spiritual Water Art Aoi. So Spiritual Water Art is fantastic because you can tribute 1 water monster, then you look at your opponent's hand, and then you can send 1 card from their hand to the graveyard. So you just, for free, look at your opponent's hand and send something there. And I say for free, it's really a 2 for 1, but because, you know, Charge can add that monster back to your hand, you can always pendulum some of those monsters back. It's really not a cost at all. You just get free information, and then from there, you can decide whether or not, you know, you want to bounce specific cards with Howling and things like that as well. Okay, so next card that we play is going to be 3 copies of Quaking Mirror Force. Quaking Mirror Force is fantastic because you want your opponents to have monsters on the field so that, you know, Terran can run things over, get effects, Rex can run things over, get effects. You could always bypass the set monsters anyway with Spinos just attacking directly, so it doesn't really matter too much, but Quaking is just a nice battle trap, just in case your opponent tries to run over your Dinomist monsters or try to bait out your Howling. Most of the time you're going to be controlling 1 or 2 Dinomist monsters at most, at least in the early game, so your opponent might try to summon something big, attack over your monster, bait out the Howling, but if you flip it face down, then they really have no other choice but to pass into the main phase 2 and go from there. Okay, and then the next card that we play is going to be 3 copies of Solemn Strike. Of course, you can't play a ton of back row without playing Solemn Strike. Solemn Strike is so great for negating hand traps, negating monster effects, just huge pushes, huge summons that your opponent makes. When they invest a ton of resources into a specific combo string, you can just negate that and you're going to be good to go. And of course, last but not least, we're going to play one copy of Solemn Warning, just to stop those things like Denko Sekka, stuff like that. Just be prepared. Some people might be playing those in the main deck, but again, it also just negates regular summons and things like that as well. The difference between Strike and Warning is that Warning can also negate normal summons, so you can negate things like Skullcrobat Joker and stuff like that as well. So just more negation, more counter traps, always fantastic to have. Alright, so that does it for the trap lineup, and that does it for the main deck. So next off, we're going to go into the side deck. Alright, so for the side deck, starting off, we were playing some more hand traps. We're playing 3 copies of DD Crow because Dinomists have fantastic control of the hand and the field, but they don't have too much control over the graveyard, which kind of sucks. But DD Crow is a good hand trap that allows us to, banish some key cards the opponent might be storing up in their graveyard to go for some big pushes, right? So DD Crow's fantastic for that. And next off, we're actually playing the Kaiju engine. So I'm just going to lay out these monsters and just explain what I'm doing with them. So Kaijus are fantastic because of the fact that Howling exists. You can Kaiju your opponent's monster, and after you do that, you can actually bounce that Kaiju back to your hand with your Howling, and then that means you can either Kaiju another monster, or you can just keep in your hand for a later turn, and you'll be good to go. So I'm playing Gameciel, Kumongous, Gadarla, Jizukuru, and Thunder King, and really you want to play 2 of the big ones. You want to play Jizukuru and Thunder King, and any of the small ones are going to be fine. I highly suggest running something like Gameciel and Kumongous because they're low enough that, Spinos and Rex can easily attack over them. And if you have things like Plesiosaurus and stuff on the field, you can lower Gameciel enough so that Terran could potentially attack over it as well. So it's fairly easy to, just summon onto your opponent's side of the field, bounce it back to your hand. It's very similar to like the Fairy Tail monster that bounces things back as well. Very good synergy between these cards, and of course you're running 1 copy of Interrupted Kaiju Slumber to potentially nuke the field, and you can easily just swing into your opponent's monsters that way. So expanding on that with more removal, we have Kaijus, where you can summon to your opponent's side of the field, but then you have board wipes in the form of Interrupted Kaiju Slumber, 1 copy of Dark Hole, and we're going to top it off with 1 copy of Raigeki, because Dinomists like to go second. Very aggressive deck if they do go second. In this build, the main deck is geared towards going first, so most likely or not, your opponent is not going to want you to go first again game 2 or 3. So if you are going second, you're going second, siding in these board wipes are going to be very good to help you set up your initial boards. Okay, so to wrap up the side deck, we're also playing 2 copies of Horn of Heaven. Horn of Heaven is actually really, really good because whenever a monster would be summoned, you can tribute 1 monster, negate the summon, and if you do, destroy that monster. And this works on things like pendulum summons, normal summons, tribute summons, anything like that. So this is fantastic against those decks that play, tribute summons, normal summons a lot. And again, when you're tributing your Dinomist monsters, they go to your extra deck, and if you have charge on the field, you're adding that monster back to your hand. You're not really losing any resources at all. So Horn of Heaven is just, in case people are siding things like Denko Sekka and stuff, you have a way to answer that in conjunction with your Solemn Warning. So the next card that we play is going to be 2 copies of Starlight Road, because people are going to be siding in Spell and Trap removal, Twin Twists and things like that, Heavy Storm Dusters. Starlight Road is a fantastic way for you to just mitigate the destruction, summon a Stardust Dragon to your side of the field, and you're going to be safe. You don't want your Howling, your Pendulum Scales, everything to just get wiped out, and you want to protect your back row as well. So yeah, that does it for the side deck, and next off we're going to go into the extra deck. Okay, so for the extra deck, starting off, we are playing 2 copies of Mistar Boy. Mistar Boy, of course, is fantastic link monster for water monsters. It just requires 2 of them, and then it has a bottom left, bottom right arrows, so you can pendulum summon 2 monsters from your extra deck instead of just 1. And if this card is destroyed by battle or by card effect, you can actually target 1 water monster in your graveyard and add it back to your hand. So if you used, Dynamis for XYZs and things, you can potentially add those back. And 2 copies of Mistar Boy is enough. You can, of course, add Mistar Boy from the graveyard back to your extra deck as well, so they can recycle themselves, and it's a pretty good cycle. Next off, we're playing 1 copy of Proxy Dragon. Proxy Dragon's great because you can summon it, like right here, onto one of Mistar Boy's link markers, and now you can summon 3 monsters from your extra deck instead of just 2. So this allows you to kind of expand your late game. If you have additional resources to go for, you can go for Proxy Dragon, then pendulum summon more stuff back, and things like that. Next off, we're playing one copy of Decode Talker to wrap up the Link monsters. Decode Talker is a nice beat stick, but it's also great because it protects your cards from targeting, and, you know, people playing Mystical Space Typhoons, Cosmic Cyclones, things like that. Decode Talker can just negate and destroy it by just tributing a monster that it points to. Of course, again, if you're tributing a Dinomist monster, you can add it back to your hand with charge, so you're not losing anything at all. Just be sure to keep at least one Dinomist monster on the field if you have Howling out, so that Howling can, you know, compulse something back to your opponent's hand when they're going for a big push. So yeah, that does it for the Link monsters. Next off, we're going to go into the XYZs. So the XYZs, we're playing one copy of Abyss Dweller. Abyss Dweller is fantastic for locking out our opponent's graveyard effects. Again, because Dynamists don't really have too much control of that, aside from DD Crow in our side deck. And Abyss Dweller also boosts our water monsters by 500 attack. And this is really great if it has a water material, because all of our Dynamists, of course, are water monsters. So that's why Abyss Dweller actually has 2 layers of utility for this deck. Next off, we're playing one copy of Castel, the Skyblaster Musketeer, because, of course, he just shuffles things back to the deck. It's just spot removal, pretty good. We also play one copy of Tornado Dragon, despite having Mystical Space Typhoon in the main deck, because just having the extra ability to go for something when you don't necessarily draw into Mystical Space Typhoon, you have extra monsters on your side of the field, you can go for Tornado Dragon, lock your opponent out of field spells and things like that as well. Next off, we play one copy of number 103, Ragna Zero. Ragna Zero synergizes very, very well with Plesio's, because Plesio's lowers your opponent's monster's attack and defense values. And then Ragna Zero makes it so that you can target one of your opponent's monsters that has a different value than its original attack value, and you can destroy that card, and then you can draw another card. So not only are you getting advantage, but you're also getting rid of your opponent's monsters. And it's really, really good in this deck. Next off, we're playing number 37, Hope Woven Dragon Spider Shark, and this card is phenomenal. Because the fact that it requires 2 level 4 monsters, you don't really see it too often, but it has the effect where whenever a monster battles, you can actually detach a material from this card, and all monsters that your opponent currently controls will lose 1,000 attack until the end of the turn. So you can potentially attack over something with 3,600 attack points, because this is 2,600 attack points. So it's such a good card for just running over your opponent's things. And again, this helps your Terrans attack over things, Rex, Spinos, you know, because we're a very battle-oriented deck. It also has the effect where if this card is actually destroyed with battle by card effect, you can target one other monster in your graveyard and special summon to your side of the field. So, you know, you can summon back one of the materials that you used for its summon. You can summon back some extra deck monsters or things that might have been destroyed, or any pendulum summon monsters that got negated with strike or warning. You can summon those back from your graveyard. It's a fairly good tool. Next off, we're playing one copy of number 61, Volcasaurus, just in case, you know, you have Rex and Spinos dealing a lot of damage, but they need to finish your opponent off. You can just overlay both of them for Volcasaurus, destroy something your opponent controls, and then burn them for the remaining life points. So it's just another layer of utility. Next off, we're playing one copy of Cyber Dragon Nova, of course, because all of the Dynamists are machine-type monsters, so if you overlay Rex and Spinos or any combination of them, you can make Nova, and on top of Nova, you can, of course, overlay into a Cyber Dragon Infinity, and Infinity is actually good in this build compared to, like, those decks that just turbo Infinity with nothing else. Because of the fact that we run so much back row, we have so much field, hand, and graveyard control in this deck, Infinity just adds more to that, and you can just negate very key plays that your opponent has while protecting your back row and your own field. So yeah, that does it for the XYZs. Next off, we're going to go into the Synchros. Alright, so for the Synchros, starting off, we're playing one copy of Odd Eyes Meteor Burst Dragon. Now, Odd Eyes Meteor Burst Dragon is fairly easy to summon in this deck. You just use Ghost Ogre and any of the level 4 monsters that are in the deck. And when this card is special summoned, you can actually target one card in your Pendulum Zone and special summon it. This card can attack this for the rest of this turn, but whatever you summon, you know, usually going to be Rex or Spine or something. If you do this during your main phase 2, you can summon a level 5 from your scale, and if you have another level 5 on the field, you can go for your Infinity play. If you are trying to go into the battle phase and you summon this in main phase 1, it just makes sure that your opponent cannot activate cards or effects during the battle phase. So it's very nice to help protect our very battle-oriented archetype, do what they need to do, and then safely proc their effects during the battle phase as well. So Meteor Burst is a fairly nice tech in this deck, and it synergizes well with the archetype. Next off, we're playing one copy of Stardust Dragon. Of course, we have Starlight Road that can summon this out, but you can always use Ghost Ogre and either Rex or Spinos to summon this, and having additional protection for your back row, especially if you're already really situated in a good position, you have a lot more card advantage than your opponent, you just want to make sure that they don't have anything that they can cheese you with. Stardust Dragon is very good for that. And of course, last but not least, we have to play one copy of the infamous Ignister Prominence, the Blasting Draco Slayer. You can always summon Ignister, again, with Ghost Ogre and either Rex or Spinos. And Ignister's so good because you can destroy one Pendulum monster, either on your side of the field, or one card in the Pendulum Zone, and destroy it. And if you do shuffle one card in the field into the deck, this card does not target, does not destroy. It is so, so good. We don't play any Draco Slayers, so the other effect is kind of useless, but 1850 attack points is nothing to laugh at, and non-targeting, non-destruction removal is fantastic. You can even destroy your opponent's Pendulum monsters or Pendulum Scales if they're playing a Pendulum archetype. Just be careful you're playing against Pendulum Magicians. You don't want to trigger too many of their effects. But yeah, that does it for the extra deck, and that does it for the deck profile. So thank you all so much for watching this video. I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed it or found it helpful, please leave a like, subscribe for more Dinomist content, and leave a comment down below letting me know what I can do to improve. And until next time, take care.